my boss said, okay, great, you've got this job. What's your next job? And I was sort of like, what? And he says, it's important to think about where you are now, but where you might want to go, because if an opportunity comes across, and this is a big organization, there's lots of different avenues, you might be the perfect person for the job, but nobody thinks you have an interest in that type of area or would want to move. You're happy where you are.
Welcome to Pharmacy Universe.
Pharmacy Universe.
Pharmacy Universe.
Pharmacy Universe.
Pharmacy Universe.
Pharmacy Universe.
Welcome to Pharmacy Universe, Episode 6. The Non-Traditional Pathway with your host, D. Bean.
Welcome to Pharmacy Universe. You are here because you are curious to learn and engage in the profession of pharmacy and its potential advancements. So our goal is to help socially educate and engage the world about #pharmacy by introducing you to ideas, people, and stories to help you maximize your engagement and understanding. Today's guest is a healthcare leader hailing from Williamston, Michigan. After graduating from Ferris State College of Pharmacy, she went on to complete her PharmD at the University of Cincinnati. She then spent time in South Carolina and New Jersey, finishing an Outcomes Research Fellowship with the University of South Carolina and Janssen Pharmaceuticals. She has taken on various pharmacy experiences within community, hospital, research, industry, consulting, and association management, which provided her a unique perspective on healthcare and pharmacy. Spending parts of her upbringing attending pharmacy association meetings with her father, Louis, she became acclimated to non-traditional pathways and the importance of networking and persistence. Her passion took her to the windy city of Chicago, where she was brave enough to move with no available job and began her journey in the non-traditional pathway. After a class action lawsuit in the year 2000, the Community Pharmacy Foundation was founded to advance patient care services by pharmacists. Serving for 8 years as the CPF Grants Administrator, she would later take over in 2015 as the second executive director of the foundation to succeed her father. She's a swimmer and photographer who enjoys sailing, scuba, surfing, and boating. Her grit and toughness even led her to compete as an Ironman triathlete. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Marie Kondic to the show.
Hi, Steve. Thanks so much for that introduction.
Anne-Marie, it's great to have you on the show, and I'm extremely excited to be talking to you today about your career, about Community Pharmacy Foundation, and really just, dive into some of the things that you've been involved with. So to start out, with the show, I like to give the audience a little bit of an idea of your background or kind of your career path. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got started within your career and then ended up at the Community Pharmacy Foundation in your current position as the executive director?
Yeah, sure. So my first exposure to pharmacy and what I thought of pharmacy was through my father, who is the executive director of the Michigan Pharmacists Association. So I knew he was a pharmacist. I saw pens, I saw tchotchkes around the house, but he went off to pharmacy, his work in pharmacy, in a suit every day and had conventions and meetings. And that was what I was exposed to as what a pharmacist was. And I ended up following in his footsteps. I went to Ferris State University and got my bachelor in pharmacy there in Big Rapids, Michigan, and then opted to do the post-BS PharmD program. And that took me to the University of Cincinnati in Ohio. And following that, not having any specific clinical interests or areas of practice expertise, I explored Outcomes Research Fellowship, and that took me further south to the University of South Carolina. And then I spent a year at Janssen Pharmaceutical in the Outcomes Research department. And wanting to head back to the Midwest, I got a position at Park Davis Pharmaceuticals, which then became Pfizer, and I was in the Outcomes Research group in clinical trials. It was really a great start to my career. It was pretty academic. I worked with an MD, PhD, and a statistician, and our client, if you will, was the FDA and new product development. And I learned a tremendous amount, but I also was interested in exploring more of marketed products and patient care. And so I switched over to the marketed products group, and my boss is in New York, and I had the opportunity to move myself to Chicago and stay with a group there. So I spent some time, got exposed to working from home, and with that and pharma and mergers and acquisitions, my position that I had was contract, and they came to me and offered me a position, but said you need to move. And New York, anywhere between Boston and Washington, D.C. would be just great. But I had really fallen in love with Chicago and wanted to stay here, and that was part of the driver of some of my decision making in my career. And that's what actually led me to stay in Chicago and look for opportunities. And I was in between jobs and had the opportunity to assist my father, who was then the executive director at the Community Pharmacy Foundation.
So just an extremely incredible pathway. And I think it's really interesting how, you start out and you kind of start taking this non-traditional pathway right away, right after graduation, and, start moving around, find a couple different opportunities within industry, move out to Chicago. Tell us a little bit about what that was like, because I know, a lot of people out there are either making moves across the country or maybe are thinking about moving to a new city. How was that experience for you moving from, city to city, state to state?
Yeah, it's probably telling a little bit about my career. I didn't have a problem with it. I actually enjoyed the variety. I liked experiencing new places. As far as Chicago, I'd been exposed to the bigger city growing up, being in Michigan. It was drivable. We could take the train. So I knew about Chicago, and that's what actually led me there. I liked the ability to be drivable to my family. That was important to me, but it gave me the opportunity of bigger city and variety, pharmacy options that may not have been available in a smaller town. And so it kind of gave me that personal satisfaction as well as the opportunity for a lot of different pharmacy options.
So, yeah, it sounds almost like you had a lot of perspective, going kind of from these different areas. You got to see pharmacy, or you got to see things from a different job, from a different city, and from a different state.
Yeah. If you look at my CV, though, you might think, I couldn't hold down a job, but it really was intentional.
And, you mentioned the Community Pharmacy Foundation, and obviously, that's where you're at currently as the executive director. So can you tell us a little bit about, what is Community Pharmacy Foundation and what sorts of goals do they have?
Yeah. So the Community Pharmacy Foundation was founded in 2000. It actually came about from a class action lawsuit that was settled before it went to trial, and money went back to pharmacies. It was discriminatory pricing, and so that's where the money came from for this foundation. And there was a founding board of 5, and their interest was to manage this foundation in perpetuity. They wanted it to stick around. They wanted to support community pharmacy practice. So it took a couple years to get established, and really their intent, I'm actually kind of looking at our website right now because we've redesigned it, and I think the key aspects are pretty prominent there, but CPF is a nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing community pharmacy practice and patient care delivery through grant funding and resource sharing. So we want to fund, but we also want to share the information, and those two aspects are really the essence of what we consider at every board meeting. We look for the next great idea to advance the practice of pharmacy in the community setting. So that can be, whatever is relevant and pertinent to practitioners at this point in time. And the things that drive our funding decisions are ideas that highlight new and emerging patient care innovations. And 3 basic criteria that we use is filters, if you will, is the project financially sustainable? Is there the ability to carry on this project once the grant completes? Is it transferable? Can the materials, go to everyone? That's a requirement. Everything has to be shareable through our website and available for others to use. And then replicable. It can't be such a niche that it's really narrow in scope. It's got to be replicable in other pharmacies and by other pharmacists and practitioners. So that's what we are and what we fund and why we do it.
So Community Pharmacy Foundation really is looking for, innovative projects, or you guys are trying to help fund these projects, but you really want them, you want the focus to be on, is it something that another pharmacy out there or another pharmacist could take and they could replicate into their business model? And are these things that are helping to, really advance practice and patient care? And one thing that I noted was, a couple years ago, I think in 2017, I was reading that, your foundation awarded about $550,000 through that grant approval process. And the average award is about $40,000. So can you tell people a little bit about what types of projects the foundations look for, and what would make an ideal project if somebody out there is interested in this?
Yeah, so that's right. Our average is about 40,000, but again, that's an average. We funded some projects that are just small, and the need to develop a tool is something that would be really helpful in practice for patient care, and that's been a couple $1,000s. All the way up to several $100,000, $150,000 grants, and those are more limited because if you think of our average, we're more around 40. But we want to span the spectrum. If it's something that's of need in practice, that's what we're looking for. What really guides our funding decision is we kind of target how the market is doing on our income and award that amount. That's where that amount comes from. But if the need for something that was big and broad and impactful, large scale, came to us, something that was significant, the board has the intention to be able to fund that if it's of great need to the profession and collaborative and sort of multi-stakeholder. So things that have the potential for reimbursement, collaboration, team-based care, co-funding, those types of things are of interest to the board. But if we look to our website as far as some examples of what's recently been funded, we have a couple of examples of chronic care management and enhanced patient outcomes and pharmacy billing. A new interesting grant, Community Pharmacy Practice Transformation Initiative, collaboration between the CPESN pharmacies, so the Community Pharmacy Enhanced Service Network, and academia collaboration. So there's that theme of partnering and advancing 24-hour ambulatory blood pressure monitoring in a community pharmacy. So we span the range of practice innovation to therapeutics, but we're looking for something that takes the project to the next level, or something that, like we say, if our first foray into patient-centered medical home, we paid the pharmacist to go into that patient-centered medical home, break through that wall. Let's have an example of pharmacists in a patient-centered medical home. Well, after that first grant, then we're looking for an example where that service is going to be paid for because there's some evidence of the benefit and the value. So we really look to advance the spectrum. And so wherever that point may be at that point in time, we might fund something, start funding the service, but then we're looking for co-funding or that contribution to show the advancement over time, and that builds the spectrum. And those tools and resources then are available on our website. And I'd say that that's been a big enhancement over time, and partly due to technology. I think back when they first started funding grants in 2002 and the materials were coming in 2004, everything sat on a desk. The website wasn't there. We couldn't load materials on and share. So that aspect has really been of greater importance, I think, in the more recent years, and also partly things like this podcast to share the information and make the materials available and the knowledge available as well.
Yeah, Anne Marie, I think there's a few things that really stick out in the message that you were explaining there. I think one was, the sharing of the ideas, being able to utilize the website, the ways that you guys are, demonstrating and sharing that knowledge for other pharmacies and other people out there who are looking to get involved or looking to expand practice. I think that that's extremely important, and I really, really hope people who are listening, can pick up on how important that is. And the second thing that I thought was really interesting is that basically, the way that I see it is that this foundation is really critical to our profession, because you're basically looking for ways to advance practice, ways to help support those different practice models, but also, like you said, ways to find models that are replicable, as well as, allow pharmacies and pharmacists to be reimbursed, because we all know that is a huge thing that's being talked about right now with value of pharmacy.
Yeah. And, just building on that a little bit, we do also partner with national associations. So we are not a member organization. We have grantees. We have, a list of people that come to us. But part of our challenge is getting the word out and making sure people know that our resource is here, because we are sort of a standalone, independent organization, which definitely has its pros as well as some of its challenges in sharing the information. But we do partner because we don't want to duplicate efforts either. So we partner with national associations on many of their initiatives that help advance community pharmacy, both in practice and also in residencies as well. And we look to encourage student involvement through the pharmacies and the faculty and the grants. So we do try to span the spectrum.
Yeah, that is really amazing, and I applaud you for all the work that you guys are putting in with collaborating. Anne Marie, I'm going to switch a little bit gears a little bit here to focus somewhat on your experience as well. Again, to give the listeners an idea of what maybe a non-traditional pathway looks like. So I know that you also spent time, and you mentioned, as a consultant throughout your career, and you've worked within industry, and you worked for an association, ACPE. So what have been kind of those top lessons that you've learned with these non-traditional experiences that you want to share? Yeah,
I think through some of those experiences, I've learned just further training, education, and exposure to different parts of business. The projects that come from large organizations sometimes may seem very monotonous. I think back to in the clinical trials days, and I think I got put on a committee to help build the database of terms and terminology and metadata, and it was very monotonous. And but it taught me a lot about database structure and the importance of being able to catalog information so that you can then find it later. And it's actually that has played into how we've organized the foundation with our grants and terminologies and numbers. And so it's just interesting that some of these committees and opportunities, although I would have never, been exposed to that and through school or had expected to, it's come back to lend itself in a helpful way down the road that I would have never anticipated or expected, and sometimes don't even realize, I imagine.
So it's almost like, those projects that we sometimes take on, or those little things that you don't really see the significance or, where it's maybe going to come up, and it then ends up coming up or helping to kind of build your framework for different opportunities in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Anne Marie, obviously there is a different pharmacy climate today for graduates or people who are coming into pharmacy. And so what advice would you give to graduates or those who are maybe looking to enter into the profession with the climate that's going on today?
Yeah, that's true. It is very, very different than when I graduated. And I think, there's variability in urban versus rural settings, and a lot of the areas where there's need is different than when I graduated. But I think some of the premise still persists as far as connecting, engaging, and exploring. You need a point of entry, and then from there's lots of opportunity. So I was actually, I think it was in my pharma career, and in one of the larger organizations, and my boss said, okay, great, you've got this job. What's your next job? And I was sort of like, what? And he says, it's important to think about where you are now, but where you might want to go, because if an opportunity comes across, and this is a big organization, there's lots of different avenues, you might be the perfect person for the job, but nobody thinks you have an interest in that type of area or would want to move. You're happy where you are. And you may be happy where you are, but if people know that you have interests or would be open, they might come to you first and ask about an opportunity. So I think that it's important to just keep those things in mind, connect. There's so much opportunity that's different than the traditional paths, particularly when I graduated in the late 90s. There's lots of clinical opportunity. Technology is it's allowing this podcast, for example, and collaborative care and working with the community. So I think there's just a lot of opportunity out there. It's not handed to you on a plate. It's not a package per se as much anymore. So that's going to need to, there's probably might be some risk or some exploration, but I think it's important to explore and to think about the areas that you like and your strengths and capitalize on those.
Yeah, I think that that's extremely important for people to pick up on as well, is, making sure that you're exploring the different areas that you're interested in. And even like you mentioned, there might be a job or an opening or an opportunity that comes and you don't know when that's going to come. And so just keeping your eyes and ears open, because I think that is something that's very tough, is just realizing that, the things that we learn in school sort of set us to go down a certain pathway, or maybe we only see, what we see while we're in school, but that there is a lot out there that you're not going to see while you're in school, you're not going to see right away. And so maybe taking that leap of faith like you did in your career can help to open up that perspective. Yeah,
the other thing too is meetings, in-person meetings through the state, the local, state, national meetings. There's so much information that's shared there and experiences. And sometimes it's sort of challenging, right? There's all these, you go to these meetings, all these great ideas, and you come home and you're just like back at work and you get back in the grind. But those in person and those motivating types of events, I think, are really important. And so I know even myself personally, I got out of school, I had sort of a lapse in my association involvement. I just got busy with life. I got busy with other things, and it's become aware. It's important to maintain that connection. So I guess that's something to keep in mind too. As that's kind of a lifelong commitment, not just a student commitment. And that would be something I would change if I could go back and realize that.
And I think, you bring up a lot of great points. And I want to really dig a little bit deeper here, because you mentioned going to meetings. You mentioned, a lot of people talk about the word networking. They use it, and it seems to be kind of a hot topic. What does that word networking mean to you? And what advice would you give to anybody out there who's either uncomfortable or really just looks at it as, that's really not for me?
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I think the thing that I've learned over time is you start with your general introductions and exchange background and what you do and where you came from. But I think it's important, or I found for me, it's helpful to kind of have that next question that's a little bit deeper that I try to ask everyone, and then just see where it goes. But what is of interest to me, or what do I want to know more about? Particularly if I'm connecting with somebody who's maybe in a managerial position, and I don't manage anyone, but what if I did? And so that's an opportunity to just find out a little bit more about that aspect. How did they get there? How did they like that? What are some challenges? And so it kind of is a standard question I have. I think about what I want to know more of, and I think it just helps you to feel more comfortable if you're not comfortable going up and talking to people, to have kind of in your back pocket, what's going to be my next question? What do I want to know more about? And kind of your elevator speech, if you will, of meeting people and walking away, because then in your mind, that's what's important to you. You're going to kind of file that in an important place, and it's going to help you to remember that conversation you had with that person.
I think you hit it spot on with the thinking about questions, going maybe a little bit deeper with conversations, and not being afraid to, put yourself out there. The one thing or one kind of piece of advice, and I don't know maybe if you've had experience with this or you want to talk about this, but the one thing or piece of advice that I usually give folks is, if you're someone who's not very comfortable talking to others, or maybe, you don't really know a whole lot of people, it makes you uncomfortable if you're at a meeting or you're out in public or whatever, I tell them to try to find someone who I kind of quote unquote term a super connector. So, everybody usually knows someone who knows a lot of people, is very comfortable talking to people, and can help to introduce you to other people. So what do you think about that concept, and have you seen that in play, or maybe what would you say to that?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And usually at most meetings, there's someone that that could be that connector, or someone from your school. At some point, a lot that there's a connection, whether you're there with that person or not. There's usually somebody that you could make that initial connection with, and then they can introduce you. We have one of our board members in particular is fantastic at introducing me as the executive director at the Community Pharmacy Foundation, and say, oh, this person is on my faculty and they do research. And it just gives people the ability to start a conversation. And from there, the rest is sort of history. And you just start talking. That initial breaking the ice has been made, and then it turns into a conversation. And I think that's the best outcome of networking and what people should hope for in starting up a conversation.
Yes, I definitely agree. Great advice, and thank you for addressing that. So if you had a magic wand, I know this one's kind of out of left field here, but if you had a magic wand and you could improve one thing within pharmacy, what do you think that would be and why?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm thinking back to a couple conversations I've had with some executives at the national associations, and thinking of their comments in a membership organization, you always have feedback and concerns and things that you'd like to see addressed. And the thing that they said was, we've heard the grumbling for years. It's like, but the messaging we're hearing now, these are really cries of pain, that this is a really challenging time. And there's just such value of pharmacists and their skills and their connection with people, that the speed that we could move and help pharmacists and pharmacies going from volume to value to provide compensation for that counseling, consultative, medication management skill that we have and that we use and deliver to patients, both in practice and, calls that come in. Even though I haven't practiced in years, I can still manage the Tylenol, ibuprofen, look for the dosing, and I still get calls because people know that I have that training and that background, and they trust it. And just if there was a way to speed that up, to get that recognized or incorporated into models of care, be it, national provider status or just local collaborations, that would be my magic wand.
So it sounds like really the thing that you're getting at is that moving us from the volume to value, showing the value of pharmacy, but also really focusing on, recognizing that pharmacists and the work that happens within different types of pharmacy is valuable to the public, is valuable to people, but making sure that there's compensation and there's kind of that financial stability to help continue to move the profession along. Yeah. The ability to sustain the service and the value that pharmacists provide patients. All right, Anne-Marie. Well, before I ask my last question for you today, would you mind telling the listeners where they can interact or find you or the Community Pharmacy Foundation online? Yeah, sure. Our main home is our website, so communitypharmacyfoundation.org. That's where you'll find all of our materials, all of our information, and the best way to reach me is through the Contact Us button on the website in several places. So all of the information is on there, and then the point of contact is there too. We also do quarterly newsletters, so there's the ability to register and sign up with our quarterly newsletters. And then we're pretty active on social media with Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter.
a few videos posted on YouTube, so you can find us there, but I'd say Facebook and Twitter are our main social media channels.
Awesome, and I will be sure to definitely include those links within the description of the podcast for people. Last question for you, Anne-Marie, before we end this. What is your call to action for the listeners that they take in the near future?
Yeah, I think it's to thank a mentor. As you know, I was thinking about this podcast and thinking about all the non-traditional ways and places that I've come from. My ability to do that was really supported by the option to call some of my mentors and get guidance and get advice. And so, I really think it's important to realize that and take the time to acknowledge them and let them know that they made an impact, especially thinking back to school. You're out of school, your path goes so many different ways. Those people in particular, those faculty in particular, send them a note of appreciation, email or handwritten note. I get one of those every once in a while, and it does really make such an impact when so much is technology today. So that's what I'd like to ask people to do.
That's an awesome call to action, and I think everybody could definitely take a moment to, thank somebody. It's a small gesture, but I think it goes a really long way, and especially what we were talking about before with networking, I think that means a lot within your network. As we wrap up here, I do like to have the guests pose one question that they would like the listeners and followers out there to answer, and they can answer via comments or on social platforms, or if they want to contact you directly. So what do you want to pose as your question for the audience today?
Yeah, I think it's to help support this transition and this momentum in the profession to move from volume to value, and that's sharing your story. And there's a couple national places where you can share those stories at Pharmacists Provide Care or the Pharmacists for Healthier Lives national campaigns. So I'd like you to just take a moment and post a story about your patient care, your pharmacist mentor experience, and how that's made a difference in your life or to someone else, and just keep that momentum of sharing the stories. Keep it going.
That is an awesome call to action, and I will also be sure to include any links that relate to that of where folks out there are able to share those stories. Well, Anne-Marie, it's really been a pleasure, and I appreciate having you on here. I think the career path you've taken and the things that you're doing over at CPF are vital and extremely critical to our profession moving forward. So I want to say thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Steve.
The non-traditional career path that Marie Kondic has taken with her career really goes to show that having different areas of experience gives you some perspective, not being worried to take a risk, and really just, working on different areas and projects that you never know when those are going to come up someday, and you never know when going to a pharmacy meeting or any meeting in general, networking is going to lead you to become the executive director of a very interesting and really critical organization within our profession. So I hope you'll take some of the tidbits and pieces of advice and kind of think through your career path and think through some of the things that you're going through, any transitions or things that you've been thinking about, and reach out to Anne-Marie, reach out to the Community Pharmacy Foundation if you're interested, and not be afraid to reach out and thank a mentor, thank somebody who's been there for you and who has given you some advice. And again, be willing to share information and things about career advice that will help other people as well. Make sure you check out some of the links in the description that will lead you to Community Pharmacy Foundation and some of the different areas that Anne-Marie mentioned within this episode. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out some of our other episodes on Spotify, iTunes, and other platforms where we share the podcast. Be sure to check out our social pages, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn. And if you're interested in being a guest or have a recommendation for a future guest, send us an email or send us a message. So until next time, Pharmacy Universe, signing off, your host, Deeb Eid.